Welcome to Full Moon Film Buff, episode 36. We're going to talk about Dr. Jekyll versus the Wolfman from 1972. I rented this from Amazon Prime. I had not seen this before. Let's discuss the prominent crew and cast. The film was directed by Leon Klimovsky, written by Paul Naschy, billed as Jacinto Molina, with effects makeup by Miguel Sese. The cast includes Paul Naschy as Waldemar Daninsky, aka the Wolfman, aka Mr. Hyde, Shirley Corrigan as Justine, Jack Taylor as Dr. Henry Jekyll, Myrta Miller as Sandra, Jose Marco as Imre Costa, Luis Iduni as Otvos, Barta Berry as Giorgio, the innkeeper. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. They never say it in the movie. Elsa Sabala as Uswika Bathory. This isn't the best El Hombre Lobo film. It takes a long time to get to the werewolf and Mr. Hyde action, and the build-up isn't great and entertaining by itself. The series is starting to lean very heavily into prior fondness for Waldemar as a character, rather than giving us any reasons to like him in this movie. That said, the positives do outweigh the negatives. The action is good once it starts. The London location is a nice change of pace, really interesting there. It's fun to see Naschy play a different character and villain in Mr. Hyde, and I love the inventiveness of the new transformation scenes. We're going to talk a lot more about them later. So yeah, I do recommend this movie. Let's go over the synopsis. A bunch of rich partygoers tease Dr. Henry Jekyll about the possibility of werewolves. Imre Costa and his fiancée, Justine, plan to travel for their honeymoon to Imre's birthplace in Transylvania. The snobbish British jerks tease them about vampires. While driving a remote mountain dirt road, Imre and Justine's auto breaks down. Justine explores nearby ruins and disturbs a poor, homeless, harmless man with her screaming. Imre threatens to stone the guy before fixing his car. Imre is warned not to go to the old cemetery and also to stay away from the Black Castle. I don't think he ever planned to go to the Black Castle. The old cemetery gives Justine the shivers, but I think it's more likely the fact that she's wearing a miniskirt in a blustery snowstorm. 3 thieves rob Imre's car. The old idiot tries to stop them and ends up getting stabbed for his troubles. The thieves then decide to add rape to murder and larceny. But our hero, Waldemar Daninsky, shows up to save the day. He crushes one rapist's head with a rock, and the other 2 run away. Waldemar takes an unconscious Justine back to his home. You guessed it, he lives in the creepy old Black Castle. She freaks out when she wakes up, seeing her dead husband laid out on a table, and then she runs into the leper again. An innkeeper warns the surviving thieves to stay clear of the castle. He explains a monster lives there with his mother, Uswika Bathory, whom he calls a witch. The chief thief, Otvos, is hearing none of it. His brothers are dead. I don't remember seeing Waldemar kill 2 men, but whatever. And he's going to get revenge. We see Waldemar with his mom, who looks like a very nice old lady. The thieves plan to rob the castle, kill the monster and his mother, and avenge the fallen. By the way, we are 33% of the way into this movie, and we finally get to see the Wolfman. The thieves shoot him and stab him, to no avail. He murders them all, except Otvos. Otvos kills the old leper. I'm not sure why. That old guy never hurt anybody. Waldemar plans to send Justine back to England. Justine encourages Waldemar to come with her, to get away from the people obviously trying to kill him. Otvos wants to make silver weapons and round up an old-fashioned mob. Justine observes Waldemar's lycanthropic transformation from the safety of her locked bedroom. She takes it pretty well. Meanwhile, Otvos manages to surprise Waldemar's mother and later displays her decapitated head. Otvos takes a shot at Waldemar, but you know what they say. You come at the king, you best not miss. Waldemar kills Otvos. He and Justice drive away from the approaching mob. Back in England, Justine convinces Dr. Jekyll to help Waldemar. Turns out Dr. Jekyll is the grandson of the infamous Dr. Henry Jekyll. Anyone surprised? No. Oh, and he's in love with Justine. The doctor prescribes a serum to transform the werewolf into a bestial Hyde-like personality. He theorizes that Mr. Hyde's superhuman ego will sublimate Daninsky's werewolf identity and eradicate it. Then they can use the antidote to cure Waldemar of his personal Mr. Hyde. It kind of sounds like evil chemotherapy. By the way, Justine has gotten over her dead husband and is now hooking up with Waldemar. Lots of shots of rainy streets. It's like the Spanish think it's always raining in England. Valdemar and a nurse get stuck in an elevator while on the way to Dr. Jekyll's office. Unfortunately for the nurse, the full moon rises. Valdemar transforms and kills her. He escapes the elevator, runs into the London night, and kills another young lady. The good news? Dr. Jekyll believes in werewolves now. The bad news? Dr. Jekyll's lab assistant Sandra is unhinged and into him. She has been committing criminal acts to help him out, and now she's jealous of Justine. Dr. Jekyll gives her a smack. And what do you know, the procedure works. But Sandra goes loco. She stabs Dr. Jekyll. She re-injects Valdemar with the Hyde serum and unleashes him on an unsuspecting Justine. Unfortunately, the procedure results in an even more savage monster than before. The werewolf only killed out of ferocious instinct. Mr. Hyde enjoys the sadistic acts he commits. Hyde rapes Justine while Sandra watches. We watch Sandra watching, but we don't actually see it, the rape. Then Sandra and Hyde take turns whipping a topless Justine. Sandra thinks she controls Hyde. She does not. Hyde strips her and whips her too before raping her. You made a bad choice, Sandra, but you probably didn't deserve that as punishment. Hyde goes out to the seedy end of London in the most campy costume ever. He picks up a prostitute and strangles her. He walks in London's fog before killing some random drunk dude. Turns out Jekyll isn't dead. Justine nurses Jekyll back from the edge of death just long enough for him to tell her how to stop Hyde. Hyde kills Sandra. Justine destroys the serum and Jekyll's notes. Hyde goes to the disco to pick up victims. He reverts back to Valdemar just in time for the full moon to rise. He transforms, illuminated by strobe light effects. It's pretty trippy. The werewolf returns to the lab. He bites Justine before she shoots him dead with silver bullets. First thing to note is that Paul Naschy gets 2 distinct makeup jobs, and they both look really good. I'm sure Naschy enjoyed the Hyde makeup. It's had to be much quicker and easier to apply, and it's much more expressive, funner for him to work in. We also get 3 really interesting transformation scenes. The first is the elevator scene. Valdemar is trapped in an elevator with a young nurse, feeling the full moon rising. He can feel it coming upon him. It's a really intriguing idea, but it didn't really work for me as much as I think they intended it to. I wanted to see more of a growing sense of dread in Valdemar, and I wanted more of a dawning sense of fear in the nurse. Overall, it felt a little rushed to me. I wish they'd taken a little more time to explore what that would be like, to know that you're about to transform, to know that you're about to kill this innocent person, not be able to stop it, not be able to do anything about it, and for that person to slowly realize the danger that they're in. I think that would have been really interesting, and I feel like that was a slightly missed opportunity. The second really interesting transformation occurs at the disco, and I love this one. The disco lights, the strobe light effect, creates a really interesting new visual effect on the old standby technique of cutting away from the transformation and back. By using these strobes, we're essentially getting a series of stills, and it really just creates a new level of artistry that we haven't seen really since Werewolf of London, nearly 30 years before, 40 years before, right? Really, really interesting. Now, obviously, it's not the kind of thing that you can replicate in every movie. Werewolves don't go to the disco all that often, but man, this was a treat. Really enjoyed it. The final intriguing transformation was the death scene itself. As it happens pretty commonly, we have our werewolf that transforms back into the human. But here, the werewolf transitions into Mr. Hyde, and then Mr. Hyde transitions back into Valdemar. We've seen this before, the werewolf releasing the human inside, but this intermediate step adds a layer of complexity and adds some fun to what's a pretty normal and basic shot. The only real addition to the werewolf lore, or the El Hombre Lobo lore, to be specific, is the idea that the wolf isn't truly evil, intrinsically evil. Not in the way that Mr. Hyde is, as this movie goes to great pains to describe. It's been hinted at a lot of werewolf stories before, since the very, very beginning, right? That the wolf is a force of nature. It's not evil in the sense of a bad person enjoying the misery that it inflicts on others, the way Mr. Hyde does. The werewolf is a killer, but it's not a torturer. It kills out of instinct and it kills out of need, not out of desire. And that's an important point when we talk about how evil and bad the werewolf can be. So I mentioned this last time we talked about El Hombre Lobo, but this is the third El Hombre Lobo movie in a row with an issue regarding women. Once again, we have a jealous, overlooked woman lashing out. First it was Ilona, now it's Sandra. Once again, she is willing to hurt anyone and everyone to repay the hurt that she has experienced. Not just the man who rebuffed her affections, but the world is going to suffer. Now, Wandessa the vampire wasn't jilted. She was just evil. Additionally, each one of these three films has at least one woman who is virtuous and an innocent saint. First it was Karen, then Elvira, and now it's Justine. These women aren't virgins. They all sleep with Valdemar. At least. They all have at least one other lover as well, a prior lover before Valdemar, which complicates the classic Madonna whore complex psychoanalytic reading that a lot of people, I think, would apply to these films. I mean, it's still there. And the fact that you can easily sort women, most women, in the El Hombre Lobo films into bad girls and good girls isn't great. But it's certainly not along just sexual purity lines. Rather, it's more along the lines of how do they react to rejection? Maybe. See, we don't have a good example in any of these three movies on a woman who properly handles rejection. I don't know if that means that the movies are trying to make the argument that no women handle rejection well and that anytime a woman's rejected, she's going to turn into a witch, right? Or if it's just that these are horror movies and so they're focusing on people doing bad things. That's always kind of a problem when you try and do academic analysis of horror films. By nature, they're horror films, and so bad things happen. You can tend to read a little too much into motivations and psychoanalyze characters and stuff like that. But it is hard to diagnose. Does rejection make them evil, or do they get rejected because they were evil and the men sensed that evilness in them, right? Sensed that badness, and that's why they got rejected in the first place. Because these men don't reject all women. I mean, obviously, Valdemar has a steady supply of women. We don't know. Now, we do have Genevieve and Wandessa in the last movie who turned into evil vampires with no accompanying rejection that we know of. There's no trauma going with that. So it's not, these movies aren't just saying that the only way that women go evil is when they get rejected by men, just that that's a common way. So let's talk for just a brief second about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We're not reaching here. Dr. Jekyll is in the title and he's in the film. Mr. Hyde is a character in the film. I felt like Nashi's Mr. Hyde costume is a pretty direct call out to Werewolf of London. Obviously, the setting called for it as well. I also suspect that Nashi was paying homage to one of the early great films in the genre. We know from his own writings that he was a big Lon Chaney Jr. fan. I suspect he was a big fan of Werewolf of London as well, just based on this film alone. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Next, I'm planning on taking a step back in time and discussing the Catman of Paris from 1946. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bolt in the chamber, and we'll see you back here next episode.